Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk about some future videos I'm going to be doing. I'd like to look at some MMOs and their narratives from a literary perspective because I think a lot of MMOs have interesting stories, but sometimes the way that they're being told isn't optimal for the player. And sometimes I think some players may underestimate the quality of a story. Perhaps even the story begins good and then starts getting worse and worse, as in the case of WoW. Or, as rumors would have me believe, in the case of Guild Wars 2, the story actually does improve in quality as the developers have been developing the game over time. I recently put out a poll asking, which MMO would you like me to analyze? And the majority requested me to talk about Final Fantasy XIV Online. So I will be tackling that particular MMO and its story in more detail. I'm very excited to get into that story because I think, like Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, the Japanese storytellers are really touching on very deep and universal truths and very powerful archetypes. And I'd like to unpack some of those characters and events and situations and talk about why people who are awake, people who are ready and open to enjoy something are actually finding something meaningful and encouraging in these stories. I'm going to also explain my MMO journey in this video particularly because I think it's important for everyone to understand where I'm coming from, my background in gaming, and my background in MMOs in particular. I think sometimes people in this day and age are very wary of bias and preconceived notions about how things should be. So I'd like to provide some kind of a background for where I'm coming from so you can see where my perspective is on these things. And in the process, perhaps we can be able to talk about why I think certain MMOs are perhaps better experiences narratively than others. So to begin with, just in general, I grew up in a very conservative religious family background. So my mom was a homeschooling mom. And as you can imagine, with conservative Christian homeschooling situation, my mother did not really appreciate video games. She would let us play them only very rarely. So I did not grow up like a lot of children with consoles and PC games at my fingertips. And another factor for that was the fact that my parents decided to let God just, take the wheel in terms of how many kids they would have. So I ended up being the eldest of 10 children. And as you may imagine, this resulted in a very financially difficult situation. So we could not afford to have computers for everyone or consoles. And this resulted in me not being a true gamer in that sense of the word until much later in life. So leading up to my early 20s, I was more of a reader. You can imagine I just read and read and read. And I began writing at a very early age, around 7. I was writing and producing and, doing art and growing all of these hobbies because, gaming was not a real option. During this time period, I was doing a lot of gaming in terms of like Ski Free or Chips Challenge. If you guys know those games, then you know. The furthest extent of my gaming was a point and click mystery that really ignited my imagination, which was Myst. So fast forward several years, it wasn't until I went overseas, actually got a better job in China for a while, I was able to finally start accessing an Xbox. So in China at that point in time, they had hacked Xboxes with specially connected hard drives that would allow you to play bootleg Xbox games very easily. So I started trying out RPGs. I think I gravitated most to RPGs because There was a degree of character customization that I enjoyed, and I really loved the narrative. And my friends, my very good friends over there, put their money together and bought me my first PlayStation, a PS4. And on that, I entered the world of gaming. Between the Xbox, the 3DS, and the PS4, I was able to spread my wings into the gaming world. I really enjoyed the Dragon Age games. Particularly, I played 2 and 3. I started 1, Origins, but I haven't finished it yet. I played Witcher 3. I also really got into No Man's Sky. And on the 3DS, I was hugely into Fantasy Life. Now, from all of these games, you might already start seeing some trends. You might already start guessing why Final Fantasy XIV would end up being my home MMO. But from those games, I actually began to feel more confident as a gamer. I started out as being fairly disempowered and not feeling like I understood how to go about things. My hand-eye coordination isn't great in the real world, never mind a game world. But I just kept working on it. I would play on easy mode. I would focus on the narrative and just have a good time. But over time, I became more and more interested in multiplayer. It all really started with Fantasy Life, oddly enough, because in Fantasy Life, you could have a localized visitor, usually a friend who's in the same room on the same Wi-Fi or whatever. They could come in and visit your little town and world and fight alongside you. And my friend had chosen to level up her tailoring, so she gave me some of her clothing because you could actually exchange items in the game, albeit very awkwardly back then. I think Fantasy Life really opened the door for me, and I began to become more and more obsessed with the idea of playing with other people. I actually enjoyed it on some level, even though IRL, I'm kind of antisocial. I saw my brother playing Elite Dangerous one day, and he would share these beautiful photos from the game, and I really, really wanted to try something like that out. My younger brother, he was more of a hardcore gamer, shall we say, and he very gently let me down and was like, look, I think there's a better game that will come along for you. You know, save up for No Man's Sky. And he was right. Elite Dangerous has a learning curve that I'm not sure I'm ready to take on. But No Man's Sky definitely landed me softly into the survival genre. Even though it was super janky and everyone hated it, I missed out on the hype train and I missed out on the hate train. I missed out on both trains because I was in China. And in China, you don't access Western social media easily. So I missed out on everything. I was just enjoying the game, the vanilla version. But over time, the game started changing and it got even more interesting. So I guess you could say No Man's Sky was another crucial game for me. So Myst was crucial because it kind of taught me about the importance of atmosphere. No Man's Sky was crucial because it taught me to move better, react better, and it kind of got me into this idea of, you know, space and stuff like that. I really love space. I love Star Wars. So, you know, No Man's Sky was really fun. Fantasy Life, though, introduced something that I really wanted to see more of, which was multiplayer. So when one day I was playing No Man's Sky, I heard this tinny voice from my PS4 controller, and I realized it was a real person in the game, and they were running around me. I can't tell you how elated I felt. Even though I enjoyed playing the game on my own and being on my own, there was something about having someone there with me that felt even better. It was a different kind of experience. So I still valued the solo experience, but there was something about having that person there that made it different. So, you know, as you can imagine, I have no idea how to communicate with this person who's running in circles and trying to communicate with me, but somehow I managed to scramble together stuff. And I ended up making contact for a short while, only a couple months, with this one player who needed a little bit of help. and I was more than willing to help them out. And that's when I think I got my second dose of multiplayer madness. I began to think, is there something else that I could play that would be kind of like No Man's Sky, be really epic, and it would have this multiplayer aspect that I'm looking for? I guess you could say that I got bit by the MMO bug, but I didn't know what kind of bug it was. Now, leading up to what I will call the 2017 move, the return to Canada in 2017, leading up to that point in time, I didn't have much access to MMOs because being in China, you are rather limited. But upon returning, I started trying out different types of MMOs. I tried out old school RuneScape. I tried out RuneScape 3. I think I played old school RuneScape for about a week, and I played RuneScape 3 for about 2 days. They did not stick. Then I tried downloading World of Warcraft because I heard from a coworker that it was really fun. My computer couldn't handle it, so I uninstalled it. I was kind of desperate now. I talked with my brother again. Elite Dangerous was kind of off the table. And my computer couldn't handle EVE Online. And I was told by many people that EVE Online would take over your life. And EVE Online was very cutthroat. However, I'd seen a few of the battles in EVE Online. They looked kind of cool. And the idea that whole groups of people would get together to fight together was fascinating to me. I guess I was really attracted to the idea of making meaningful content with people and helping people. And even more so, I was really fascinated with this concept of, PvE, PvP, this blend. Was this the game for me? However, the difficulty curve and the fact that it would require a lot of your life was a bit daunting for me. Because you see, at the same point in time, I had returned to school to finish my fourth year. I was working full-time at the same time. And I was trying to maintain other hobbies and other things in my life, including my writing. So you can imagine that I was a little bit leery of throwing myself entirely into EVE Online. Then I heard the news that EVE Online was going to be adapted for mobile in a small sister version called EVE Echoes. So I got into EVE Echoes day one, and I began my journey. I played EVE Echoes for about 2 years, perhaps even 3. Let's say 2, though. 2.5. I had a very fascinating experience in EVE Echoes. After a few months of flying solo, I joined a corp. I experienced a coup firsthand. I watched a Discord get trashed. I left the corp. It just was getting a bit nutty. I flew solo again, and then I joined the second corp, my last one. This corp was very well run. The CEO was really cool. He had a vice president that was a very tough lady. Together, these two people ran the corp as part of a larger alliance, and being part of a larger, more active alliance that was in combat with various other alliances, you can imagine I saw quite a bit of action, even though I was more of an indie player. I guess my time with EVE Echoes, being about 2.5 years, was really fascinating. I really liked the PvE. I liked working with people. I learned a lot from other players. I was playing alongside, I would say, 98% males, which meant a very different dynamic than, being solo or being with a bunch of girls. I actually really enjoyed it, and I have fond memories of my corp. And if I ever return, I would hope to be able to return to that corp. EVE Echoes, however, began to pall on me. There were certain changes made that destroyed the industry side of things for a little bit. They may have balanced it out and made it better, but by the time that they got to cloning, I kind of pieced out. At the same time, I was playing another mobile game called Love Nikki, which was all about fashion. And I was really loving that too, but the narrative was not there. There was no narrative in Eve Echoes, and there was no narrative in Love Nikki. Well, Love Nikki had narrative, but it was poorly translated, and it was just sometimes just really weird. So I couldn't sometimes get into what was going on. So I became a cutscene skipper. Between Love Nikki with the fashion and Eve Echoes with combat and the PvE, I was fairly happy, but it didn't feel complete. I just wasn't invested. When I talked with other fellow corp mates in my Eve Echoes corp, I became very, very aware that there were many other MMOs that I could try out. So during this period, I went on an MMO shopping hunt. So I tried out SWTOR, Star Wars, The Old Republic. I tried out EVE Online for a bit. I tried out Lord of the Rings Online. I tried Elder Scrolls Online. I tried old school RuneScape again. I was really desperate. I was really, really desperate. In some cases, I was a little bummed out. So for example, EVE Online is sort of free to play. You can grind for in-game currency, Plex, so that you can pay for your sub. But you have to be ready to grind a lot. And that felt a bit overwhelming for me, because once again, I wanted to have a life. With Lord of the Rings Online, it was just a bit too old school for me, but I really appreciated the music, the voice acting, and the narrative. I did like those parts. So I could see myself going back to Lord of the Rings Online just to enjoy the main story. But there were some weird things going on, particularly surrounding mounts and moving around and stuff. So I eventually uninstalled it to make room for Star Wars The Old Republic. I had a corp mate who was really into it, so I downloaded it. I tried it out. I liked the character customization stuff. I felt like that was so fun to do. I also really loved the look of the game, and I liked the movement, and the narrative was okay. I got past the tutorial into Coruscant when I was basically told that the free trial had ended. You have to remember that at this point in time, after having returned from a fairly not very high paying job, but it could cover your expenses, I returned to Canada to a situation where our economy got worse and worse and our rent started skyrocketing. So I just simply could not afford subbing. So I had to uninstall it because I got to a point where I just couldn't pay consistently for it. But once again, it's a game that I think I would totally return to again in the future. OSRS, after trying it again because it's free, I really wanted to make it work. Everyone loves it. Everyone tells me it's a good game. However, I just felt like the graphics were a big hindrance for me. I didn't feel connected to my character. The story just wasn't there for me. I uninstalled. It was a very easy uninstall, unfortunately. And finally, with ESO, I knew that there's something there, and it's one thing I do want to try again. However, I really struggled with feeling connected to the game. Maybe it was the graphics. So in my opinion, I may not have given ESO a fair shake. I also felt like it wasn't working really well on my computer at that time. So I came to the conclusion I needed a new computer, so I started saving up for it. So once I got my new computer, I finally had the computer that I needed to play one of these MMOs. The question was, which one? Should I return to SWTOR? Should I try another run at EVE Online? Should I try out ESO? It was at this point in time that 3 MMOs started to swim into my consciousness thanks to YouTube algorithms. The first one was WoW, because Asmongold started showing up in my YouTube. And before I knew it, I was listening to stuff about WoW. So I knew that perhaps I should try WoW again. But a lot of the stuff I heard about WoW was not very positive. I think everyone was reeling from the disappointment that was BFA. And then as time went on, reeling from the disappointment that was Shadowlands. Guild Wars 2 was also another name that kept popping up. People didn't seem too like crazy about it. There was no hype train for Guild Wars 2, but I kept hearing that it was a solid game. And when I found out that Jeremy Soule was the composer for the game, my interest was piqued. However, a third game swam into my consciousness around this time thanks to SkillUp, who mentioned that Final Fantasy XIV was a phenomenal game. I was trying to figure out which one of those three I would attempt next when Asmongold started streaming Final Fantasy XIV. And when I saw how few buttons were on the hotbar and how simple and slow it was at the beginning, I felt very confident that someone like myself, who is not a natural gamer and who considers themselves to be a very slow learner, I felt like maybe this is the game for me. And as he went through the character customization screen, I saw Catboys. And the rest is history. No, I'm only joking a little bit. I watched the first stream and I saw that it seemed to be quite text heavy. There seemed to be an actual attempt at a story. I was so shocked. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had to try it out for myself. And then I found out that there was a significant free trial that would allow me to just try things out and I wouldn't have to feel like I was crushed monetarily at the beginning. I could try it out, really get far into it, and see for myself if it was the thing for me. Yeah, the rest is history. When I got into Final Fantasy XIV, it felt like exactly what I was looking for. I needed a game that would not demand too much of my time, that would not punish me for not grinding forever. I needed a game that would have an extremely slow but steady learning curve. I needed a game that had a fantastic narrative and was attempting to actually do something narratively that made sense. I needed a game that was aesthetically pleasing to me. A game that would allow me to play multiple classes just like in fantasy life. A game that would have that atmosphere and that sense of wonder that I had in Myst. A game that would let me customize my character and let me dress them up like in Love Nikki and in fantasy life and in Animal Crossing. There was really the sense that there was so much that I could do that I felt like this was the game for me. That's how I ended up playing Final Fantasy XIV. My story doesn't quite end there, because I decided to branch out a little, so I tried another run at WoW. I also tried Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 is still a work in progress. It's something I actually do want to get back into. I did enjoy Guild Wars 2. Is the narrative anywhere near what I felt for Final Fantasy XIV? No, not even at the start. In my opinion, A Realm Reborn still does a better job than Guild Wars 2. I know that sounds crazy. Guild Wars 2's character customization and its opening choices that determine the tutorial are fantastic. I have to give it all the kudos in the world. I love it. The music and the art style to me are pleasing as well. However, the delivery of the narrative is a bit too Western comic book for me. I'll explain that in another video. Going back into WoW was also eye-opening. I was able to get into a new tutorial zone, this kind of island thing. Why was I there? Nothing stuck with me narratively. Nothing stood out to me. There was no main character that I could cotton onto and get invested in right away. There was just a sense of I'm pushing through this zone to get to the good stuff. And when I got to the good stuff, I discovered that I had no choice but to do BFA because for whatever reason, the first character you make, especially if you're a first-time player, has to go through BFA. And every time I clicked on the big doors of the city, the starting city I'd chosen, which was like the Alliance City, whatever, Storm something. Every time I clicked on the main doors, it was like, do you want to leave the tutorial zone? And it was really scary, actually. So I was like, no, joking. And so then I ended up like on the ship with this woman called Jaina that I'm just like, who is she? Why are they talking to me this way? Why is this woman angry at her? Why are we in jail? So I logged out that night after having woken my character up in jail, and I never went back. Okay, so this is not intended to be an MMO review. Maybe sometime in the future I will take a look at the MMOs I tried out and try to assess why they failed for me. But I do want to say that almost all the MMOs I tried were great for the players that they were attempting to target. The problem was the player that they were attempting to target was not me. And that's it, really. However, I will say that some of them did a better job with narrative than others. And so while I didn't quite enjoy Guild Wars 2 approach all the way, I could recognize and respect the work that did go into it, with all the voice acting and the music and everything. Same thing for SWTOR and Lord of the Rings Online, and maybe even ESO. I don't know. I need to get further into ESO. I'm going to end my short little discussion here. I just wanted to let everyone know kind of what was really pushing me to play Final Fantasy XIV over other MMOs. As you may have noticed, I tried quite a variety spanning from sci-fi to fantasy, and many of them had a variety of graphical fidelity or graphical quality, or even more realistic versus not. When I talk about Final Fantasy XIV, there is definitely a couple years of experience playing it now, and I will be bringing my literary eye to the story, and I will also be bringing my writer's eye to point out things that worked for me. And if I find anything that didn't work for me narratively, we can talk about that as well. In terms of Guild Wars 2 and World of Warcraft, I'm very interested in making content about that as well. To that end, I have successfully re-downloaded World of Warcraft. Whether I'll pay a sub for it is unknown, because apparently you have to buy this game and then the sub, just like Final Fantasy XIV. And to be frank, Final Fantasy XIV is a bit cheaper. Maybe I'm just a cheapskate. I don't know. But anyhow, we'll see how far I get with WoW. Maybe I'll do a free trial run and talk about how shitty the free trial is. Anyhow, I'm rambling at this point, so I'm just going to end here. And hopefully, very soon, there will be a Final Fantasy XIV focused analytical video where I'm going to actually talk about the first scenes in A Realm Reborn. Because a lot of people go after A Realm Reborn, but I'm interested in talking about why it works. And yeah, so I'm excited, and thanks to everyone who gave input and voted on my little poll. I really appreciated it, and I look forward to sharing my thoughts about Final Fantasy XIV in the future. And don't worry, Guild Wars 2 and WoW lovers, I will do my best to cover that as well. If you'd like to see me stream WoW or Guild Wars 2, let me know in the comments below, and maybe I could set up a stream or something on YouTube. So let me know what you all think. Thanks for listening. Take care.